There once were creatures trapped in their own mind, unable to share their experiences with others. The rich, dynamical systems inside their heads showing them countless worlds, yet forever hidden behind the barrier of understanding. That is until one day, a single one pointed at itself and spoke. It spoke its name, proclaiming its independence from the systems it existed in. And the more this creature spoke, the more others learned to listen. It told stories of vast distant lands it had seen, from the highest mountaintops with their sprawling snow-covered peaks, standing nobly over the valleys they preside, to the sprawling sands of the beaches it walked, feeling the crisp touch of the cold waves against their sand-covered feet. It told stories by the light of the fire to pass on the lessons learned, teaching the next generation how to survive the dangers the world brought. The more these creatures learned to speak, the more they harnessed the power of the story. Generation after generation, they flourished, spreading all over the globe. As time passed, the stories they told began to change as they changed the world around them. They built monuments to their dominance, sprawling cities in which they could thrive. As they grew, they began to solve the puzzles of the world around them. They invented a language that could describe reality, a language that seems mystical to some, yet beautiful to others. The language of mathematics. They applied this language to all facets of life, unraveling the secrets of space-time itself, a craving for knowledge that can never be satiated. Yet there was still one puzzle they couldn't figure out. How does the brain work to produce this thing that we call consciousness? So, they began to turn this language inwards, writing the mathematics of the brain. Back in 1952, scientists Alan Hodgkin and Andrew Huxley wanted to answer this very question. So, they began with the fundamental unit of the brain's structure, the humble neuron. By isolating a single neuron from a giant squid, they were able to measure many of its electrical properties and work out how it fires signals. They found that the signals are propagated across the membrane of the cell, facilitated by the concentration of different ions present in and outside the cell, such as sodium and potassium. When a cell fires, it is referred to as an action potential, which appears as a sharp spike in the voltage of the membrane of the cell. To control the flow of these ions across the membrane, there are ion channel gates located within it, which open and close in response to the local voltages located around the gates. The firing of an action potential begins with the sodium gate opening, allowing positively charged sodium ions to pass through the gates and enter the cell. This causes the voltage of the membrane to be driven upward from the resting potential. This starts slowly at first, but the change in the potential causes more sodium ion gates to open up, leading to a rapid spike in the voltage that we measure as the action potential. This massive change in voltage then causes the potassium ion gates to open up, allowing free positively charged potassium ions to exit the cell, which drives our voltage back down towards our resting state. Then, there is a brief refractory period where the cell rebalances its concentrations of sodium and potassium, after which it is ready to fire once again. But how does the action potential of a single cell translate into the complex computations that create what we call the conscious experience? It has to do with the structure of the neuron. The central part of the neuron is called the soma, and it is the part of the cell that contains all the important things related to cell function, such as the nucleus. But from the soma outgrow long tendrils called axons, that they themselves end in dense branch-like structures called dendrites. The dendrites allow a single cell to connect to thousands of other cells. This mess of branches all connecting to each other is called the dendritic tree, creating a dense forest of biocomputational power. This vast network that makes up the human brain is estimated to contain up to 86 billion neurons. The key is now how all these individual units communicate with each other in order to go from lonely cells to a cohesive unit, allowing signals to flow from single cells into the entire network. When a cell triggers its action potential, that signal needs to be carried through the axons to the ends of their dendritic branches, which are called the synaptic terminals. To help facilitate this signal from weakening, the axons are wrapped in a fatty substance called myelin, which helps to both insulate the cell and reduce the membrane capacitance. This strengthens and maintains the signal carried by the action potential. Once the signal reaches the synaptic terminal, the voltage change in the membrane at these sites causes calcium channels located on the terminals to open up and release calcium ions. These now free ions find calcium-binding proteins on the same membrane, causing them to release a transmitter molecule, which then diffuses through the synaptic cleft, meeting receptors in the spines of the opposing terminal. The receiving neuron then either depolarizes or hyperpolarizes, depending on the nature of the transmitter. When this process is scaled up to the billions of neurons in the brain, the computational structure begins to appear as wave-like in nature, with signals spreading throughout entire regions of the brain. All billions of these neurons in a giant connected spiderweb, a vast network communicating in waves flowing throughout the brain. And if you have a system that obeys mathematical principles, future states of that model can be predicted by current ones. How did you choose what to eat for breakfast this morning? Did you say, go to your fridge, see that you have some eggs left, and decide to make an omelet? Or maybe it was the bagel with cream cheese, lightly toasted with just a hint of salt. Maybe you decided to skip breakfast altogether. I mean, we've all been there, right? Regardless of the decision you made, it truly felt like you made that decision. But what is really going on inside your mind is much more complicated than, man, I feel like some bacon and eggs today. I'm gonna make that for breakfast. The book Who's in Charge by neuroscientist Michael Gazzaniga helps provide valuable insight to what is really happening behind the wheel of our minds. In his book, he introduces us to the idea of the human interpreter module of the brain, which is that little voice we sometimes hear inside our heads. The premise is that our conscious experience happens in a post-hoc world. He tells the story of him as a child in the southern deserts of California, constantly aware of the danger of rattlesnakes. When he would hear a bush rattle, the information coming into his brain would travel through the amygdala, which sees this rustling of a bush and activates the fight or flight regions of the brain, sending danger signals and forcing the muscles to jump away from the bush. This was all done to help protect him from dangerous rattlesnakes. And if one were to ask him why he leapt away, he would promptly respond, "I thought I heard a rattlesnake." This response is the interpreter module at work. He had already begun to leap away from the bush before he even consciously registered that there may be a snake there. But the interpreter module took the information of witnessing his body leap away and concluded that the reason for the action was because, well, there may have been a snake in the bush. It sets us up for the illusion of free will, and that many of our actions aren't our own. This is the reason why muscle memory is so critical in many areas. Evolution has been selected for speed, and wrapping conscious processes into fast-paced events can make them messy and slow. When one plays a piano piece they have long practiced, they are not consciously thinking about every single note that comes next, but rather relying on the muscle memory built up to take them through the piece. We are hardwired to try and explain the world around us, and it is all due to the interpreter module. It writes the stories we tell ourselves in order to make sense of the unexplainable world around us. And no matter how hard one tries, we are all subject to its post-hoc explanations of the events that occur, trapped by the decisions our minds and bodies make for us. You chose to have eggs for breakfast because of the entire sequence of events that led you to that moment that puts your brain in the state to make the decision to eat eggs. And it's the interpreter module that says to oneself, I'm having eggs for breakfast. Some of you might say, no, I picked eggs because there was a carton of eggs available. It was the obvious choice. But that's just your interpreter module at work once again. Just how Newton's laws of motion say you can predict the final state of a system if you know all the initial conditions, the brain, which is subject to the same laws of physics, must behave the same way as a deterministic system. With our mathematical approach to understanding brain computation and knowledge of the post-hoc explanations of the interpreter module, the ideas of consciousness being a deterministic process can be brought into focus. Ted Chiang illustrates this idea of determinism cleanly in his short story, What's Expected of Us. In this story, they have invented a device called the predictor. It is a simple green LED that lights up when you press it, but with a reality warping catch. Its circuit has a negative time delay, meaning it only lights up 1 second before the button is pressed. Many people play with the predictor, trying to trick it into lighting it up without pressing the button. But no matter how much people try, the button is always pressed 1 second before lighting up. The outcome of the press is guaranteed, shattering the illusion of free will. Some people in the story are able to move on with their lives, but others succumb to the realization that free will is just an illusion, and any choice that one makes was always bound to happen. They end up in a state called akinetic mutism, a disorder where one is unable to move or speak, and once people's illusion of free will is shattered, their free will itself is shattered, and they lose the ability to become an active element of life, doomed to simply watch from an akinetic husk. How can one manage to continue to live their life, knowing that every action they take, every decision they make, every person they interact with, that no matter how hard one tries, the outcome was always the same? Free will was just an illusion, and the path we take through life is no different than the path a ball takes as it travels through the air. We are still bound to the same deterministic laws of physics that govern everything else around us. If the brain truly is a deterministic system, then free will doesn't exist. But fundamentally, this isn't the problem we should be grappling with. What matters more is whether one can continue to believe in the illusion of free will with a deterministic understanding of consciousness. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what the mathematicians and physicists tell us, the illusion of free will is a perfect one. Whether my decision to make eggs for breakfast has been determined from the beginning means not in the face of, well, it really still feels like I chose to eat eggs this morning. This is a powerful belief, and it's really the only one that matters. Paulo Coelho's novel, The Alchemist, tells the story of finding one's personal legend. As to quote, "Realize one's destiny is a person's only obligation," end quote. In his story, the shepherd boy Santiago must learn the language of the world to fulfill his personal legend. The idea that each of us have a path set forth by the world beautifully complements the idea of determinism and recontextualizes it into a better light. That, no matter who you are, there is something in this life that you are destined to accomplish. But not everyone fulfills their personal legend. They choose not to follow the omens the world gives them. They choose to ignore the signs. It mattered not that it was what they were destined to do. Whether burdened down by the responsibilities of life, or simply missing the omens, some people do not fulfill their legend. The illusion of free will allowed them to make these decisions, hence erasing their personal legend as destiny entirely. They were never going to fulfill it from the start, and only by living life out could that ever be realized. It's paradoxical, it seems, to have a world in which free will and determinism can coexist. How can one have a predetermined destiny, yet also the ability to choose whether to fulfill said destiny? But it is the decisions that we make that shape us into who we are, not the determined path supposedly laid before us. Minecraft is a game all about freedom. The freedom to explore as you wish. The freedom to build what you want. An entire world at your fingertips, only limited by one's imagination. In Minecraft, there is no destiny that one must fulfill, no grand path that they follow, but rather, the dreams created by one's mind. Yet while the player is free to create their own path, the inevitability of the universe still guides them, as eventually, the player will beat the game by slaying the Ender Dragon. Once they do, the end credits roll, and you are rewarded with the end poem, told by two seemingly omnipotent entities who watched your journey the entire way. They discuss the role of the player in the universe, how they came about, where they came from, and what it means to be a conscious thing experiencing life. Whether that life is based on the ones and zeros of a game, or the billion-year-old code of DNA, they ask if the player can hear the universe speaking to them, and if it knows that the universe loves them. The poem ends with the entity saying to the player, "And the universe said, 'You are not alone.' And the universe said, 'You are not separate from every other thing.' And the universe said, You are the universe tasting itself, talking to itself, reading its own code. And the universe said, I love you, because you are love. Whether we are observers along for the ride our minds take us on, we're active beings who influence the path we walk. What matters is the truth in which we believe. If one does believe that life is predetermined, then it is their responsibility to listen to their heart, to follow the path of their personal legend. If we are free agents in this world, then we get to determine how we will shape this world. We are all born into this life with expectations placed upon us, but that matters not. We are all given the gift of life, and it is our responsibility to make the most of it. Whether free will is an illusion or not is irrelevant, because regardless of it all, it is still a perfect one. One that allows us to decide who we will be in this life. So who will you be? Will you lose your sense of freedom, or will you follow the omens the world gives you and succeed in your personal legend?